a PM is a sum of all their experiences. And I really, like, it could be true for all professions, but I think it's so true for a job that's so nebulous, that's so soft skill dependent. I have a very different way of approaching product management than you, because I worked at different companies that have taught me different philosophies, right? So I think at every different stage, there's something that I had to learn.
Amaraj, cheers.
How's it going, Zakir?
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on. This is actually my first ever podcast.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
we're trying this out for the first time for the both of us. So excited to have you. For those who don't know you, would love to start with just kind of your quick journey on getting into product.
Oh, great. Sounds like a recruiter screen.
Yeah,
So
it is. It basically is.
I typically say I'll start at the top. I started as an engineer at Microsoft. I was working for a startup that had been recently acquired. And why that was great was I got to work in one of their offices in Silicon Valley instead of the mothership, which means that I got free food while the Seattle employees did not. So that was actually a huge perk of being in Silicon Valley. I got to write in Python, which I loved doing at the time. And I got to work on this company that was essentially trying to build a conversational intelligence platform. And it sounded really revolutionary at the time, but now it actually feels kind of quite mundane because it's kind of what ChatGPT or Claude does, which is your ability to talk with these like automated bots in a way that's interwoven in a conversation. And unless you kind of do things through a chat interface, like making plans to go to a movie and then using the Fandango app within the chat itself to get the tickets.
You're working on Cortana, right?
It was at Cortana adjacent. It was under the Cortana umbrella.
Cortana, for those who don't know, or like there's the
Halo.
OG, like Halo AI.
Yeah, and it was actually really interesting. And I typically joke in product interviews that I got to see a division of a company crumble from within.
Yeah.
So it was like being inside a collapsing building and seeing like every quarter after quarter, the CPO would change, the targets would change, it'd get smaller until finally Satya announced that Cortana would no longer be focused on as a consumer product and only be focused on this enterprise application. So it's probably the right move. But yeah, I started as an engineer.
Real quick on that. So we both went to Michigan together, obviously, and we both studied industrial and operations engineering.
Sure.
So how did you get into a software engineer role at Microsoft?
Well, I was also a computer science major, and that's probably the answer there.
That is true.
I had the requisite degree.
You did the double major, or you did the minor?
I did the double major. I started out with the minor, and then my advisor sat me down and said, "Hey, like he's like the way your classes are organized. If you stay just one extra year, you can get a full degree in computer science, and that'll really help you work as a software engineer." The interesting thing is, at that time, I already knew that I wanted to be a product manager. So I was like, I had a mentor, a friend of a family friend who was working at Google. He's in a lot of the upper leaderships in a lot of big tech, but he got his start out doing product management. Really sharp guy, and he kind of opened my eyes to this pathway. But he was actually the one that encouraged me to get my software degree, to start out as a software engineer. Because he's like, it's a really important thing to kind of learn this fundamental if you want to work in computer science in this industry. But I was just itching. I was like, I really just think I want to do product management. It sounds so much cooler.
Yeah.
So I actually tried to get a PM job right out of school, but that didn't work out. I ended up then staying fifth year, getting my software engineering degree, computer science degree, and then getting a job at Microsoft as a software engineer.
Right.
Which I think in retrospect was a great decision for me because I got to learn how to like write code in production and what that really entails, right? Like this, I think we really glamorize like vibe coding, and that's fun. Like, everyone should be able to code.
Right.
But there's a difference between like coding up something for yourself and then coding up something that can be deployed and used for like millions of people can use.
Totally.
Right?
I feel like a lot of people over the years have asked me like, well, I'm a software engineer. I really want to be a product manager. Like, I want to make the jump. So my response usually is wait it out. I think you should continue to be a software engineer and get those skills to the point where you feel like you've actually kind of saturated yourself in your ability to learn more there, and then move to PM. Because I feel like once you move to PM, unless you don't like it, it's very hard to go back to being a software engineer. Nowadays, it might be a little different with AI, but I think at least historically, it's been difficult.
a lot of times have people come up to me, or I guess reach out or me at LinkedIn that they want to make that transition. And I'll always say like, are you sure? Right. And if, if I have some connection to them, or if I know them, I usually have to take a call with them, and I always press them on why, right? That I'm always looking, I think, for red flags that you might be thinking about product management the
Yeah.
wrong way, right? I think a lot of people, might not happen as much anymore, but I know for a good portion of time, a lot of people say, well, you're the CEO of the product.
Right.
And that's just not true. The CEO is the CEO of the product, right? Um,
Quarterback. I like to say quarterback.
the quarterback's not a bad one. Definitely. But, in some senses, I would say you're maybe the quarterback there. But I do think it's really important to understand like why you want to make the transition, because things are very different, right? And ultimately, the reason that I wanted to make the transition was that I was more interested in solving human and business problems than I was interested in solving tech problems. I miss coding. You most recently through the because ChatGPT now has the ability to understand and index your GitHub repositories. I've been able to start coding once again for my current company. But there is something like really nice and pure about coding that is very different, right? There's something very different about problem solving a technological problem, right? Something that involves like logic and problem solving that is very different than solving a human problem, which is not logical at all, right? Communication is not logical at all in many ways. So I try to figure out when people come to me like, what are you really looking for? Is it that you're just like tired of coding? Is it that you actually want to do some sort of product management? And honestly, I try to paint a little bit of a morbid picture,
Yeah.
just because I try to like, I think it's really easy to hear all the great things. I want people to hear like some of the really miserable things about being a product manager. And if they still like on board at that, I'll typically try to give them a framework, and a framework that worked for me, which is that, you shadow, if you have the ability to, as an engineer, you should have the ability to be around product managers, you shadow them. You ask them like, hey, can I sit in on these meetings that you might not
Right.
be necessary for? Can you like, is there any small elements of work that you can pick off and help them? Right. A lot of times, like, and people have asked me this before in various companies as well. I'm always happy to let people see into this lens if they're interested in this. I'm happy to give them some sort of small assignment as long as their manager is okay with it.
Right.
And then what I did was like I raised my hand. I raised my hand to say like, hey, I would like to be a PM if the opportunity ever arises. And that's what I did at Microsoft. I just kept doing both the software job, but I started picking more and more pieces of the product work. And thankfully, my organization was very open to that. And when an opportunity arose, like I was a natural fit
Mm-hmm.
because it was for a position that was in the same organization, and they already knew that I was doing the work and I was interested. So like, why not just hire internally?
Yeah.
So that's always the advice that I recommend. It's like, try to do it where you're at, because that's always going to be the easiest transition.
So then you made that transition internally,
Sure.
and then over time, you've worked at a bunch of different startups since then. And kind of, what have you liked most about the kind of niche that you've kind of targeted for yourself?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, and just to give our listeners a quick purview of where I've worked at, went from Microsoft to ZipRecruiter. It's a job hiring marketplace. Then I moved to Noom, which is a successful weight loss program through a mobile app. And then I transitioned from there to Hims, which is a publicly traded telehealth company. And then currently I'm at a early stage startup, the smallest company I've ever been at, called Tender Care, which is a platform to help people who are caring for their loved ones, or caregivers or family caregivers. And I'm the head of product there.
You've essentially gotten smaller over
I've
time.
gone smaller intentionally. I've intentionally tried to go. Yeah, it's not been like a direct line trend, but I've gone from like one of the largest companies on earth to smaller and smaller, and that has been intentional. I think one, I'm I've been so curious to know what product management is like at these different stages. I love being able to wear many hats. Like
That's why you're wearing one now.
I'm wearing one now. Exactly. Europe or nowhere, right?
That's right.
So I love coding. I like writing documentation. I love playing around in Figma. I like doing user research. Like I like all the elements of the entire product management lifecycle. And that's actually partially why I transitioned from Microsoft to ZipRecruiter, because I was looking for a smaller company that would let me touch more parts of that lifecycle. Um, I like working with different business functions. I like working with sales. I like working with product marketing. And the smaller a company you get traditionally, the more you're able to do in those different areas and influence those areas,
Mm-hmm.
right? So for me, it's a little bit, it's been more like, how do I just constantly get exposed to different skill sets, different like perspectives of the tech org, right? Because like we sit in the middle, right? And when you're at such a large company, you sit in the middle, that sits in the middle, that sits in the middle, that sits in the middle. And I wanted to be able to touch all the different sides of the business. And I felt like getting smaller would allow me to do that. And I felt like and I felt like that's also where a lot of the growth opportunities are, right? Like when you're running at a smaller company, you just have the ability to upskill so much more easily because you have to do the work. Otherwise, that work's not getting done.
Where do you think was the area that you had to upskill the most in?
At what stage of my career? At every stage, there's a new thing I need to learn.
Well, let's say
I've
like
never.
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I guess every role has a new kind of
So
opportunity to learn.
my favorite phrase, I don't know if I came up with this or I learned it from someone else, but my favorite is that a PM is a sum of all their experiences. And I really, like, it could be true for all professions, but I think it's so true for a job that's so nebulous, that's so soft skill dependent, right? Like, I have a very different way of approaching product management than you because I worked at different companies that have taught me different
Right.
elements of product management, have taught me different philosophies, right? So I think at every different stage, there's something that I had to learn. When I got to ZipRecruiter, I was very fortunate to be in a really strong product organization because I needed to like, I needed to really learn and get the reps in, right? I need to really like break my teeth against like, this idea of like what is the product management life cycle? Like
Yeah.
what how do I get good at A/B testing? How do I get good at working with design? How do I get good at releasing a product? And my advice always to early stage PMs is like go find a place where you can get a lot of reps in.
Yeah.
Like more than
Get the
anything else,
wins.
just get the reps in. Like you get the wins if you can.
Yeah.
You always get a few wins, but even in the losses, you learn so much. But what you don't learn is if it's really hard to get in a rep. And what I mean by that is like you should be able to take a feature from start to finish over and over and over again. And that's the only way you learn, right? And
Yeah.
you need to be at a place that has that velocity. You need to be in a product that can ship that frequently. And I work at a lot of times at B2C companies, a little bit different at B2B. You're not shipping as much.
Right.
Those are training a little bit of different skills. So there's still learnings to be had there. But that I think really made me a stronger PM is that I just want so many experiments,
Yeah.
you know?
I think there's this perception out there, especially as the PM discipline has become so broad now that there's this like perfect way to be the perfect PM. And I think that's just completely wrong. Right? Like to exactly what you said. There's just being a PM at ZipRecruiter is very different than being a PM at Amazon. And so I feel like just finding out kind of what the strengths of that role and company are, I think what matters more and the sum of the experiences to your point is probably where it lands.
Yeah. And I think that's like a fault of the profession. And I think it's a fault of the industry is that there haven't been very clear delineated lines. I know now like the rise of the AI PM. What does that mean? Everybody's trying to define it themselves, right? Like the problem is there's so many different ways. Everybody's life would be easier if there was like very clear standardized definitions of what is a core PM versus a growth PM versus an AI PM versus a platform PM versus, all these different ways that you can label yourself and the work that you're expected to do. And the truth is like, and this goes back to, I guess I'm calling it my quote, the sum of all your experiences is like you are naturally by what you've done and what you're inclined to do and good at, you kind of fall into a category. And there's like some people that are trying to define some frameworks, but in general, like that is like what you need to get good at also understanding is like what type of PM are you?
Yeah. You mentioned the AI PM. So maybe let's unpack that a bit. How do you view AI in the world of product management right now? I'll keep it broad.
Yeah, it's really broad. Um, I think you should be using it, right? Is that a safe take?
Hopefully not a hot take.
No, hopefully not a hot take. I mean, it depends on the circles you're in.
And what do you think using AI actually means? Because I feel like I agree with you. There's all this out there of like AI PM this, but no one has really gotten exposure to using AI until only the last couple years in the way that we want them to. And so, how do you make yourself relevant and keep yourself relevant over the next 10 years in your mind?
I think first, like even taking a step back, like I think we need to first acknowledge that so many of these tools are in their infancy, and companies that are either in highly regulated industries or larger companies are going to have certain compliance issues where like it's going to look very different being AI PM. Like if you're not able to use ChatGPT, you're not able to use any prototyping tool. Like what does AI PMing actually look like, right? It actually might just be like we have internal Microsoft Copilot that runs on like some LLM that's like likely outdated at this point, but we have to be able to silo our data. So I think there's a few different ways. Like, how as a business can you really adopt AI? Like, as a PM, like, how do you make yourself to? I think your more question was like, how do you brand yourself as an AI PM? Like, what does that really mean? I think one is like it's getting comfortable with tooling that likely is going to be a part of the product management workflow, right? Like, that's very broad strokes. What I mean here is like, obviously, like, get good at using Claude or ChatGPT, right? Like pay for a premium subscription and understand like how do I use projects? How do I build custom GPTs? How do I use an MCP? And
Do you have an
and
example of like something you've done recently that you felt like really unlocked your ability to use this AI to your advantage?
yeah, I I think I was listening to a podcast with Hiten Shah and he mentioned using projects more
Mhm,
in ChatGPT.
mhm.
And he's talked about like creating them for like each different purpose. So I created one for PRD generation. What I did was like I downloaded and gave it the file that is our company's PRD template that
Yeah,
that I've come up with, and then I gave it instructions on
at the project level.
at the project level. This is the
Yeah,
project level of what I think, like what I'm going to give it in any given chat, what I expect it to output based off the PRD template,
mhm.
and how I expect it to go about getting any sort of missing data.
'Kay.
And then I also uploaded, and this is why it's like currently so cumbersome. And then I uploaded a PDF I created of all the features of the app, which will like likely be out of date fairly soon. So
Yeah,
it's kind of annoying right now, but and that's like a really good starting point. And then what I could do then is like, and anybody on my team, I guess not anybody on my team because a project is based on the actual account. But what I could do is give it in broad strokes like a feature that I was thinking about and any like optional information. And then the way I set up the instructions was that it will ask me at most 5 questions to make sure it understands like the feature, the problem it's solving, the
mhm.
hypothesis, and like what metric I think it's going to move. And then like any ancillary data, it thinks that it needs.
So you've trained it to ask you questions as part of the way you interact with it, which I think is really interesting. I feel like most people don't do that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's the up level, right? Because if it didn't do that, it would make up so much information, right?
Right.
Because it doesn't have that information. And, but that's what I think it means to start being an AIP. It's
Right.
just the most broad stroke level.
Right.
Like this is like actually like even taking a step back, I think this is more an AI enabled PM.
I agree. I don't think there actually should be something as an AI PM.
Well,
AI should be part of every.
but let me challenge that. By AI enabled, I think okay, you know how to use Claude, ChatGPT. You
Right.
know how to use your prototyping tools like V0, Lovable, Bull, and you use those to either like showcase them as artifacts to your stakeholders or to use them in like user research. You might be using like Figma, Make, or any tools to help you with design or working with designers to do that. I think that's like an AI enabled PM, like how you get stuff like down, like how do you get pieces moving like quicker across the workflow, right? Maybe you're using Cursor to help write PRs even, right? So
Like more
depending
of
on
a productivity game.
yes, it's a productivity game, right? And that's what AI is enabling you to do. Like these things that take longer, discovery that takes longer, all of a sudden is much quicker because you have this chat interface that can give you like the world's knowledge, right? So
Right.
you have all these elements. What I think in this is my I think this is the right definition, but I think an AI PM is a PM that is able to work on like AI products, and I do think that's different because I do think you need to understand
Right.
LLMs and how
Right.
they work at a fundamental level. You need to be able to implement things like evals, which are such a hot topic. You need to be able to understand, right, like the correctness of an AI, when to use different LLM models, how to budget accordingly. So I think that's what probably the distinction is.
I agree.
And I think that's going to be a lot. I think the former and AI enabled PM, every PM is going to have to be able to do. Like
Yeah.
that's going to be like a baseline. You're going to have to learn how to do it. I think being an AI PM is, if you're just really interested in that technology and what it can do when applied to existing products, that would probably, and I think that will probably pay really well if you're interested in that sort of work.
Yeah. I think AI enabled is the appropriate term to land on. I think every PM more or less should be enabled.
And like, and why wouldn't you want to do it? It makes your life easier.
So, how would you define yourself, I guess, as a PM? Like, what would be the areas that you spike? I'm going back to the recruiter.
Yeah, you're going back
Yeah.
to the question. Actually, I don't think a recruiter's ever asked that question. It would be a good question to ask, honestly. But before I answer, why don't you tell me what you think you are?
I actually think that I would not classify myself as any type of PM. My hot take is that I think right now, with the how fast the industry is moving because of I think it helps to be a PM that can kind of be put into the fire and kind of figure out what to do because of what you said earlier, which is a PM being effective in by the sum of all of their experiences. So I see myself more as a generalist and I see that more as a strong suit rather than kind of like being in a particular domain. So it's a it's a half answer to your question, but the answer is that I'm answering my original question for myself, which is I don't think that all PMs necessarily need to specialize in a particular domain, but you can challenge
Kids, don't be like Zakir.
that.
Develop a specialization. My hot take's the opposite. I think more and more, I think a specialization will help. It doesn't have to be like a very concrete specialization. And I hear what you're saying. Like in one sense, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself too much. Taking on whatever comes your way, I think is a defining characteristic and trait of a good PM, a great PM, right? Like your job is like rife with ambiguity. A lot of times, like you have no idea what's going on. You just have to you just need to get in there and do something. So I do think it's really important to always, if you want to be a product manager, if you are a product manager, you should always have the mindset of like, I will figure this out, right? Like I need to figure this out. The company needs me to figure this out. I can do this. You're the body that's like, I can help out here. I can help out here. So I do think it's really vital to develop like a well-rounded skill set. So I do think that's really important.
But also, I think the other part to that is just being constantly curious. Like, I feel like sometimes if you specialize, which can be a very important aspect to you being effective, but if you specialize too much, you risk being able to be curious about other parts where then you say, oh, that's not my job. And like, you never want a PM to be at a point where they're saying, hey, that's not my job.
That's true. I agree with the fact that you should never say it's not my job. I think you should always be willing. I mean, that is part of the job, right? Like the part of the job is like you're a leader. You help fill in where help needs to be filled in. I will say the reason I'm advocating for specialization, I think, is like twofold. I think one, it makes you more marketable, and the reason I think this is like a lot of times when people are hiring, they do not know what they're looking for,
Right.
right? But what helps is like certain heuristics. If you're a fintech company, you're like, oh, they have fintech experience, great. Oh, like they worked on this sort of credit line product, great, right? It's so much easier because otherwise,
The hits are important. I think the hits are important.
yeah. But it's like it helps a very, and you might have like a variety of needs you might need that product person for, but it helps us like give more shape to it, right? Like it's a really easy checklist for someone to be able to say like yes. That's why like when I left ZipRecruiter, I would get hit up left and right for opportunities in the HR industry because like the guy already knows the industry. He's already worked at a place that's like probably a competitor. Like he knows the in and outs. I would say like it also then just helps you. I think it helps you get better. And the reason I think it helps you get better is that that experience compounds in a positive manner. But let's say you work at three different fintech companies that touch like 3 different parts of the industry.
Yeah.
You are so much superior than someone that has worked at a health tech company, an HR company, and then let's say a fintech. Just because you have the different experiences, how these different product orgs have moved, how these different companies have worked at. It's not always going to be the case, but I do think like then let's say if you want to go to another fintech company, like it just puts you at such an edge, but you have to be really curious about that stuff,
Yeah.
right? Like you can't just,
I don't know. I think that like overall, I agree with you, but at the same time, there is, I think, a lot of recency bias that happens in
sure,
job market. Whereas that person that you said has worked at a bunch of different industries, but currently works at a fintech company is potentially like recruiters are seeing that, oh, this person's branded currently as a fintech person, and we can go after that. And so it's very interesting. I don't know, like it's. I think I agree with your perspective, but I think I think not all kind of recruiters and folks kind of looking in the market kind of see that in the same way that we do.
yeah, that's fair. Like, and it also depends on, it also depends on kind of like what your career goals are.
That's also true.
I think, to your original question, how do I define myself? I think based on my track record and what my interests are is like I'm a consumer growth focused PM, right? Like if you are a company that is building a consumer product and you need help growing it, I'm probably a good fit for you.
Yeah.
That's not to say like I love working on B2B products, but I just haven't worked on that many of them. I mostly just worked on them at ZipRecruiter. And so like that element where I'm like, you don't want to get too pigeonholed, right? I went and took a call a while back for a company I was really interested in, but they say, hey, we're looking for someone. They came back and said, we're only looking for someone with B2B experience. I'm like, I have B2B experience, but the problem is that it's so much consumer on top of that.
Exactly.
And there are differences, right? So it's important to understand those differences. So that is like some of some of your experiences can sometimes work against you.
So how would you define consumer growth?
I would just define growth as connecting someone to the core value of the product.
Okay.
Right. Like I
Wouldn't you argue that any PM needs to do that?
not always. Yes and no, right? Like I think it really varies at at a smaller stage company, at a smaller company, right? Where your product, the product manager is likely both doing things that are growing the product and also like evolving the core product,
Okay.
right? And by that, what I mean is like, for example, when I was at ZipRecruiter, I was working the employer side of the marketplace, and I was doing both what is called like core product and growth product. So I was trying to improve the feature set of the product, like getting candidates, so that people would use it more and then retain, right? Like improving our overall revenue.
Right.
But I was also focused on getting more people to actually realize like, oh, cool, I can use ZipRecruiter to hire for this job. Like, oh, they have the candidates that I'm looking for. Like, oh, this is like helping them like have that light switch. And that's like growth product. But I was doing both, right? If I just kept improving the product, I might be able to get some more of those people in the door, but I'm not doing anything. I'm mostly helping the people that are already in the door and already like, oh, this is cool. Just keeping that, right? And as you get to a bigger company, for example, when I got to Noom, which had a bigger product org, they very clearly split it out between growth and core. And the core product team was all about, okay, we got this person in to the platform. They're using it. They're paying for it. How do we help them lose weight the most? Because that was their main thing, right? Like, what do we need to build in product? How do we gamify it? And then when you look at the growth element, it's like, well, with one, it's like, how do we get people to decide this is right for them, activate and pay us, right?
Yep.
How do we get people to refer friends? Because that's the virality of it. You know, how we get people to reactivate. So they tried Noom once, they want to come back to it. These are all things where it's like, how do we get them to the valuable product here, right? They're out here. How do we get them here?
It's probably more than it becomes centered around the goal then, right? Like I imagine a growth team would be really focused on driving up acquisition and activation, whereas a core feature PM team will be more focused around retention and active usage and potentially even like monetization.
I would say that, I mean, you can put growth teams against any metric. Typically, they're aligned to like different metrics, right, that they're trying to move.
But a
For
growth team wouldn't go into tech retention, would they?
They could. I mean, they could. Once again, it's like how you define it, right? Like if if the retention just requires utilizing the product consistently, then they probably won't focus on it that much,
Right.
right? But if it's like a e-com purchase or something, then like you might need to have like some growth work there. But in general, I like the way, and every company will define it differently, but growth will typically be aligned to different metrics that get people into the core product and utilizing it. And then you have these core product teams that are just like adding more features, and they're usually very tied to either metrics that are relevant to the user experience. Like, so very rel so like at like, let's just say at Noom, it could have been like number of pounds lost in a per user, or like ZipRecruiter could be number of candidates matched to an employer, which is like very user centric,
Yeah.
right? Whereas like growth metrics a lot of times are tied to things that are important to the business, right? So like, what is your activation rate? What is your conversion rate? Right? They're still helping the user get to that value, but they kind of almost like precede it, right?
Right.
So it was interesting because when I first took my like first pure growth role at Noom, it was this, it was a little bit of an identity crisis because all of a sudden, and the reason I was also because Noom very clearly delineated between the two. They had like two different orgs. You know, when I joined the company, I was like, oh, cool, I'm gonna be helping people lose weight, right? Oh, that's really interesting. But I was, you know, ultimately tasked with metrics that felt like they were moving the business forward. A conversion rate, how many people get in the
Yep.
premium program, how can
Yep.
we increase the AOV of the product? And it almost like I was like, oh, am I actually enjoying this work? Like, is this like, it feels like I'm just trying to get more money from our user, trying to get more money for the business. I'm not actually like making meaningful strides on improving that user product. And I don't think that's actually the right way of thinking about it. Like, part of what growth is doing is taking this really excellent product you've developed, which, by the way, you have to do the product work first before you do the growth work. If you have a bad product, like, why would you try to grow people into that, right? So I'm trying to get people that that are like, might be the ideal user, maybe tangential to the ideal user, and get them to see the value of the product so that they benefit from the thing that we've built. Right? So it's a very necessary function. And it's a very fun function if you like numbers, you like metrics, you like really rapid experimentation. But there is this sort of difference, right? Because you may not be working on the thing that is the product itself, the
Right.
thing that is actually providing that value.
Would you say that growth teams typically then come in once the product already has traction or some product market
Yeah,
fit?
yeah, 100%. I mean, before then, the thing that grows your product is the product,
Right.
right? Like, your product should be good enough that people want to use it. And you should be able to, like, if you don't have product market fit, then, you know, like, you need to go figure out the product. Growth, and then growth usually comes as first in terms, some sort of terms of like marketing, right? Maybe some like light touches to the product. Like growth, a lot, been in growth orgs where I sit under the marketing team too, right? Because there is this really clear tie in as well.
Yeah.
Growth encompasses all of it: sales, marketing, product,
I
which
think
is why I find it really fun.
some companies, I think, even have growth marketing and growth product managers, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, and the difference there is like growth marketing will be more focused on like where are like the channels we should be like pushing towards, like how can we like more cheaply acquire users, that sort of thing. And growth product will be like, what is like the things that we can adjust in our experience. Usually that's like onboarding, reactivation, referrals, that sort of thing that will move the needle in the metrics that we care about.
Yeah.
So it's a very different way of thinking about it, and you're much more aligned to the business, I've typically found. Now, I think the point here of like why a growth product is product in its own right is because you work with engineering, you work with design, you work with some of these more technical functions.
Right.
If those elements were like stripped out, I don't know if I would call it product management. I might call it like either like project management,
Or product strategy.
or yeah, or like it. I do think there are functions where you're trying to get together, move a bunch of stakeholders, but it isn't getting deep enough into the product itself. Though the only reason growth product exists is because there are a lot of growth wins to be found by making adjustments to the product itself, which is a technical thing to do,
Mm.
right? So I think that is the difference there, and what I would caveat is that if you're not actually making changes to the product, I don't really think of it as product management. That's the line in the sand I'm choosing to draw.
I like it. All right. So then now walk me through your experience. You moved into being the first PM at a startup. Like you were doing a bunch of growth work. Then you kind of moved into a role where you're probably doing a bit of everything again. And so help people understand what it's like to be a first PM at a startup and how that kind of adjusted your view.
Yeah, it's good. It's hard. I would never recommend this sort of role to someone who's early in their career, mostly because you just don't have the ability to. You learn, but you don't already have those like product fundamentals. You end up, and it's hard to learn it on a job where you're the first PM. I mean, look, the role is a lot about supporting the vision of the founder, right? Because they're the ones that have set out to build this thing. Your job is to use your product instincts, the fundamentals that you have acquired, to execute on that and execute it in a way that gets you there the quickest and the cheapest in terms of like resourcing, right? Like a lot of my job is just like incredibly aggressive and ruthless prioritization, right? I think when your team is so small, the amount of surface area you're able to impact is much smaller, right? That means the amount of things you can say yes to is just so much smaller. There's so many good ideas and so many things that you just like have to keep saying no to,
Mhm.
right? And that is like truly what a lot of the job is, because other than that, like it's just executing, building, understanding, doing the discovery, figuring out like, okay, like where do we need to go next based off like what we just did, is understanding the business and the market. It's a really great way to step into what it's like to really run a company and to like really grow something from scratch and to grow like and to, see if it can hit that escape velocity that you really need with a product. But it is not for the faint of heart.
How does the velocity change of how you operate within that type of environment? Like, is it that you're shipping faster? Is it that you're making faster decisions? Is it that you have to learn the strategy faster? Like, or is it everything? Like, how does that change when you're in a super small environment like that as a PM?
I do think, especially now, given like AI driven development, that velocity is the name of the game. I think, it's kind of always been the person that ships the most, learns the most, and can like grow the most. That was like a philosophy at Noom. It's like you ship quickly so you can learn fast and then you can outpace your competition, right? So it's a very similar ethos where you have to ship. Like that's your advantage as an early stage startup. That your advantage is like you have speed on your side. You have less bureaucracy, less red tape. Like there's only 5 people that need to sit together and make a decision on something, right? Or even fewer. And so you can keep iterating, keep moving through and figuring out, are we making the right changes or building the product the right way, that we're seeing the metrics move in the right way. But that also means like it comes at a cost, right? Like there are certain like processes that you may have in bigger companies that we just do away with because like it adds too much friction, right?
Facebook was always infamous for the move fast and break things. I feel like we got away from that for a little bit as an industry. Do you think we're back to it again, basically, at some of these earlier stage startups where that is the world again, where you just have to really get that shipping velocity down?
I think it depends on what you're building. I've never agreed with the philosophy of break things. You do need to move fast, but it's been over a decade since Facebook launched, right? Like it's been so long,
Right.
and the expectations from users are much, much higher.
Right.
Like the baseline is much higher. You can't ship bad products. And if you ship things that are buggy, like there's alternatives that people will find and utilize, right? Like, so I think you need to ship fast, but you need to one understand like what is the willingness of your user and your customer to come on that journey with you, right? If you're building something that's like mission critical to someone's business, I would ship fast but carefully, right? Like I would be very careful with the pieces that you're touching. And shipping fast for them may look like, oh, instead of every 3 months, we ship once a month. And that's like the fastest we can ship. For a consumer, like a consumer like social media app, let's say you're building, where like the stakes are much lower, or that there's a much more willingness for users to like stay on your app, maybe you ship once a week, right? And you're like, I'm wearing this like incredible velocity and we're shipping, but we're making sure that we're shipping like it's still as much as possible. Like you're always gonna have bugs. You're always gonna have issues.
Right.
But if you break the user experience and it just doesn't work, it is much easier to find an alternative. And I just don't. So I think it's like ship fast, but be smart. Once a habit has been built, you've succeeded in so many ways. So if you're going to change the UX, be incredibly careful because if you break that habit, you're potentially doing a lot of negative damage to the utilization of your product. So I think that you should be very careful of. Now, when you're earlier, if that habit hasn't been built yet, or you have a really small user base, then I think it's fine. Go for it. You're trying to figure out. You're trying to what sticks, what works, and that may require a lot of like big changes. But with a redesign, like once again, like be very, very careful, like what your core product value is. If you do too much to change your core product value, the redesign does too much that makes it more difficult. You can upset a lot of customers, lose a lot of customers, and that's just a hard place to find yourself back from.
So you have started a newsletter recently. So tell
I
the
have,
audience a little bit about what that newsletter is about.
yeah, definitely. Started a newsletter a couple months ago called Out of Scope, and it is a newsletter for people who are in product management or product adjacent and want to just level up uh, one tactic at a time is how I say that. I think like there's a lot of good product content out there. A lot of it I find like really difficult to make actionable. Honestly, like I kind of get inundated, right? Like, here's like a 2 hour YouTube video with like 20 different things you can do. It's like, I don't know how to do this, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted stuff that was targeted more at, product managers with like my similar level of experience. So they've been in the game for a little bit, trying to figure out, what are some different tactics that they can utilize. So I've been writing that for a couple of months and I've really been enjoying the process.
Why did you get into it in the first place?
Well, I think with product, you end up writing a lot in general. You writing a lot of PRDs, user stories, that sort of thing. So writing had really become this thing that I was very comfortable doing. I think the other thing for me is that, when I give mentoring advice to other younger experienced PMs, I end up saying things. I'm like, wow, that's a really smart thing I just said. Like, do I actually believe this? Do I actually think this? And, for me, like being able to express an idea and talk about ideas, how I crystallize my own thinking. So I was like, okay, like I think I have some interesting potential ideas and thoughts and opinions. So if I write them down, maybe I'll develop my own perspectives on them. And I had some like thoughts that I really felt strongly about, opinions that I felt strongly about. So I wanted to be able to share those. And a newsletter is just another type of product. And it was like a product that I'd never really worked on before. So I was kind of interested to try to build one.
Okay. And is there an kind of advice that you would have for someone who wanted to go out and start a newsletter? Because obviously you did that while you're working. I'm sure we've talked a little bit about how much time you're putting in to each post, and so maybe just walk through like the behind the scenes on the work involved in doing this, and how you kind of plan to keep that up.
Yeah, let me give you a slightly adjacent answer. I think that, and I tell this to everybody, I think that every professional in a corporate environment should write and should write publicly.
I
I think
agree. Solid.
it's pretty low stakes, and truly it is low stakes. Like I think one of the hardest things that I had to overcome was like, oh, okay, I haven't written and posted online before. What are people gonna think? Are people gonna mock me? Is this gonna be like really stupid? And honestly, like most people aren't malevolent. Like it's gonna be a neutral to positive reaction, right? Most likely neutral. Some people are like, oh, that's cool. Thanks for putting that out there. And so I don't think I think that you should always and each person should write. And if you're not going to write online, if you're too uncomfortable, I get that. But you should still write and have clarity in your own thoughts. I think it's so important to write your opinions and your thoughts on the matter. And it makes you better as a professional. Like I've gotten better as being a PM because the tactics that I've written
I
about,
agree.
I'm like, oh, cool. Like I should actually make sure that I'm doing this every single week in and week out. This tactic that I've written about that I thought I was doing, but now I can do it better because I've actually explained it to myself how to do it. Now, starting a newsletter is like super easy today. Like just choose a newsletter provider. I think you use Substack. I
Yep.
use Beehive.
Right.
There's like 100 different things I want to do to improve my newsletter, but actually just starting it out, like it's very simple. You just write a topic, post about it so a few people subscribe, and then you send it out. And I think the most important thing is like doing it at a frequency, right? Like just hold
Consistency.
yourself to it. Yeah, be
I think
consistent.
consistency is the most important thing. I think that a lot of people kind of view putting yourself out there as this, like you said, like this like high bar. The way the LinkedIn algorithm even works is that pretty much most people in your network, if not everyone, is going to see what you put out
Sure.
there. I think many people view LinkedIn as just basically a kind of promotional place for you to tell people when you get a new job or when you get
Yeah,
promoted or
exactly.
when you have launched a product that you've been working on for the last year. And I think it can be so much more. At the end of the day, LinkedIn's a social network. And on social networking websites and apps, people share what they view and what they believe. And I think that's important. And so I think there's an aspect of kind of putting yourself out there, even at the kind of the lowest kind of denominator, which is LinkedIn, and just even posting what you think. And then eventually that could even turn into a newsletter.
I think the only really important thing here is like make it your own. Yeah, have an original thought, something that comes from your experience, something that you've been thinking about.
Right.
Take a moment to figure out like how you want to talk about it, and then just post that. Because I think to your point, what there isn't enough of on LinkedIn is people expressing their original
Original and
thoughts. There's
genuine.
there's just too much of, oh, I've done this cool thing, or oh, like I'm shilling something, so here's like a thing to kind of promote that.
Right.
And we all have to like shill ourselves sometimes. So and I've done it, so I get that. But it's really interesting to engage with people who are reflecting or talking about things that they've realized or done at work. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think it needs to be more accepted for people to do that. And I think that will make LinkedIn a place where, frankly, even more people spend their time. All right, let's pivot to mentorship because I know you've
Sure.
done a little bit of that
Yeah.
in your career as well. So I guess what my first question would be around what you're kind of seeing right now in the industry. I feel like when you're talking to folks that are a little bit less experienced or trying to find their way,
Yeah.
what types of things are they coming to you for? What are the problems that people are experiencing in the industry right now?
Look, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a tough time. And I think the reason it's tough right now, especially for earlier product managers, is that one, the AI enabled PMs are able to do more, right? So you're trying to stretch product managers across even more, which I don't think it's not great, right? So that's why so many PMs are also been getting very burnt out.
Yeah.
So that's not great, but like that is what is happening. People are willing to like sit on these roles, have them open for longer, and try to figure out like what are the ways to not hire, because PMs are expensive, right? Like and it's a job that should be carefully hired for. So in general, it's a hard job to get. Um, I also think when a PM that is like more experienced like ourselves, we are the sum of all of our experiences. And if you have, especially if you have good names on those experiences, like you or I have, it it helps you pass like a litmus test, right? So earlier PMs don't have that. So if you have like just like one experience, or even if you're trying to break into it, it's much harder now because it's just not. We're in a place where you need potentially fewer PMs. You have like a larger audience you can look from, and you're looking for people that already have that sort of like reputation.
Do you agree with the trade-off though that companies are making in terms of deprioritizing kind of earlier PM roles? Because what I'm seeing is pretty much there are no PM role. There are very few PM roles out there that are below a senior PM,
Yeah.
junior PM. And I believe that there should be a more of a healthy mix between having those more senior folks and junior. The reason why is because I think that me and you may be in a kind of minority bucket that are actually adopting and the AI tools that are out there and that are more AI enabled. But I don't think the average PM at, let's say, like 5+ years of experience at the kind of senior PM level is actually using AI as much as we think they are. And I think there are a lot of these younger folks that are hungrier, are using AI because that's what they know, and may actually have higher trajectory, higher potential, higher appetite to actually be more effective than a senior PM who's leveraging or barely leveraging AI.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on like your one. I think to your first point, I don't agree with how the market is currently hiring. I unfortunately don't have much say in it, but
Yeah.
I do think. Well, I mean, like to that point, I think what they're trying to do, what companies are trying to do, is say like, "Hey, senior PMs, you can pick up more executional work because now it's easier." And I think that's bad because what that means is like we have less time to do the strategy because it's not like if you stop doing the executional work, the wheel stops turning,
Right.
right? Like it that is like that is the work that has to get done. But what that means is like either we're stretched super thin and we're working really late hours to get the more strategy stuff, or we're just not getting to it. And if we're not getting to it, then like the ship may not be entirely steered in the right direction. Right. So I don't think it's great because I think everybody has like bandwidth constraints, right? Like you can't be on all the time and doing this work. And I think that's unfortunately one thing that's happening is that, a lot of jobs that I worked, you start the day at 8 a.m., you finish at 8 or 9 p.m., you just rinse and repeat because there just isn't enough time. So I don't love the way the trend is going. I hope there is a pushback against it. And I hope that companies realize that you're not going to get the best product like thinking out of people when they're also being forced to do like 5 different other jobs. And that's going to affect your product in the long run. Like maybe in the short run, you get some benefit on your bottom line, but I think it's a disaster for the long run
So,
for
like, what would be
companies.
your advice, I guess, for, let's say, someone who's like 1 to 3 years experience who wants to kind of move into their next PM role? How would you advise
Oh,
them?
so they already have PM
Yeah,
experience.
let's say they're already kind of early in their PM career.
Sure.
Because I feel like that actually is the place. Like, there are people who are aspiring to get into
Yeah.
PM, and I think there still are avenues for that, especially coming out of college. But like once you're in the industry and you have a couple of years of experience, that jump right now, because you're still below a senior PM, is really, really difficult. And so I'd be curious on what you think in terms of what they can do to make themselves more marketable, essentially.
What I would do is I would look at the industry I'm in. Let's just choose industry. Let's just say I'm in health tech. Okay, great. I got a health tech job, so I know that I'm a better shot at any company that's in the health tech space because I have an advantage, even though I may have less years.
Right.
Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at any company that is looking to hire a senior PM,
Hmm.
and I'm going to first of all do research on the company, what they're looking to hire, where their growth areas are. I might cobble together like a 1 to 2 page like slide deck, right? Like something like really shows, maybe like a lovable prototype. Like, oh, here's your thing. Here's a cool, interesting feature you could do. No one's asked for this, right? Chances are they may not even see it. But I might try to reach out to the recruiter, the hiring manager, say, I'm really interested in this opportunity. I've actually worked in the space. I know this and this. Would love to chat. I've actually done this sort of research, send along as an attachment, right? It may just go into the abyss. Like that is the truth of it. It may just go into the abyss. But they may be like, interested, like, oh, like, this person has experience. Oh, they clearly know something here. And that's how you get your foot in the door. From there, like it is still an uphill battle because you don't have that experience.
Right.
Right. And if the truth is like if they may have just said like they may have just put a number of years there because they think that's right.
And again, most
But
people don't really know.
most people don't know, right? So as long as you can showcase you can handle the work that they need you to do, right? Like then like that is a good way to move forward. Now the importance here is like there are probably some roles that you based on your years of experience and maybe a better fit for. You can kind of tease it out by looking at what the job is trying to get you to do.
Hmm.
If it's still like let's say if it's like 70% executional and 70% execution, 30% like strategy, I think you're fine. Now, if it's like somehow flipped, where like they're like looking to open a new product line or new business area, like truthfully, if I was on the other lens, like I wouldn't hire you because like I need someone who has done that sort of work before. And the chances are, if you have 1 to 3 years of experience, you haven't. Right? You've gotten your reps in, you know the healthcare industry, but you haven't ever like established a new business. You haven't probably like likely grown it. So I think that you just might not be a good fit for. And I can't really help you with that. But it's figuring out, do I have an industry match? Do I have some sort of other thing that makes me more advantageous, even though I have less experience? It could be some other vector, like maybe, I don't know, like you happen, if you don't, maybe you don't know the space well, but you know the technology well, or like there's some sort of alignment in your experience there. I think that would help you out a lot. And then other than that, like I think you just need to really prove that you've done the work. Not even that you're capable of doing work, that you've done the work, right? And actually, I do think this is like where specialization really helps you,
True.
right? Because I do think you need some sort of advantage. That was my other point. You need like, if you're already disadvantaged in one way, whether or not that's actually a true disadvantage, right? Once again, like they could just be putting a number of years of experience and they don't know.
Right.
You need some sort of advantage. And maybe that's like a personal connection, or maybe that's like that's an advantage.
Yep. That's
maybe it's the industry. Maybe it's like, I don't know. It could be anything, but it needs something that like puts you ahead.
Yeah.
And that's probably your only shot. And you just keep trying.
I want you to reflect back and think about what advice you would give or would have given your younger self at the time.
It's just like, don't sweat the small stuff. I think it's so easy to get wrapped up in the moment and think your world is crumbling down. Like, you know, you look like you might miss a deadline, or the stakeholder didn't like that you made a mistake. And you just think, oh my God, like this is the end of the world. Product's gonna fail, business gonna fail. And it's not that. It's typically not that. You know, like, okay, if the business is gonna fail, then yes, like, you know, keep the line, keep the focus, figure it out. And I think this kind of just goes my philosophy in life is just like, don't take yourself too seriously and don't take everything too seriously, because you will burn out and you will have a bad time. And product managers come under immense stress. Their mistakes will be made. You know, it's like, everybody makes mistakes. Balls will be dropped. You'll have to figure things out. People will get upset. And you just need to figure out, you know, why do we do this job? We're doing this because we're solving business problems and human problems. And that's not always easy. And I think it's really important to remind yourself that, like, this isn't the end of the world. Everything's going to be okay. We just got to figure out what to do. Part of this job, too, is being able to keep a level head, because you have to keep the engine moving along, right? A great product manager, if everybody else is like freaking out, you're figuring out your way through, right? It's navigating all the obstacles, because obstacles always arise. It could be someone that's difficult to work with. It could be like, oh, someone was let go, so all of a sudden the resourcing is blown. So yeah, I think like my advice would be just like relax and figure your way through.
Awesome. That is a great way to end the conversation.
All done here?
All done.
All right.
Amaraj,
Thank you so much.
thanks for coming on.
Of course.